Welcome to 5 Good Questions. I'm your host, Jake Taylor. Our guest today is Eric Jorgenson. Eric is a product strategist and writer. In 2011, he joined the founding team of Zaarly, a company dedicated to helping homeowners find home service providers they can trust. His business blog, Evergreen, educates and entertains more than 1 million readers. You can find all of his projects and other writing on ejorgenson.com. Today we're going to be discussing the book, The Almanack of Naval Ravikant. Let's ask Eric 5 good questions. But first, I'm happy to announce my literary debut, The Rebel Allocator, is now available on Amazon in both print and digital formats. You could say it's about time. I've been pouring my heart into this book for more than 3 years. A well-known SoCal billionaire received an early copy of the book and actually called me to say he enjoyed the story and was adamant that I get it made into a movie. Talk about a surreal experience getting 20 minutes on the phone with one of my heroes. My friend Tobias Carlisle had this to say: Jacob Taylor has written a modern-day investment classic. The Rebel Allocator is reminiscences of a stock operator for value investors. It's a fictionalized retelling of the lessons in The Intelligent Investor in an accessible page-turner. If you want to learn how to invest like Warren Buffett by sitting at his knee, this is the book for you. Wow, how flattering is that? I was blown away when he sent me that. I've created dozens of ad-free author interviews over the last 5 years and never asked for anything in return. If you've gotten any value out of these efforts, please do me a personal favor and pick up a copy of The Rebel Allocator. I promise you won't regret it. And now, on with the show. All right, welcome back to the program, everybody. My guest today is Eric Jorgenson, and he is the author, compiler, editor. I'm not sure what the correct word is, but what word would you pick for that, Eric?
I've been bouncing around. I say author, but I feel weird saying I wrote it because I kind of built it.
The general contractor of the book that's coming out soon, that is the Almanack of Naval Ravikant. So thanks for taking the time to be with us today, Eric.
I'm happy to be here, Jake.
So, just to jump right into this, question number one is, this is a very unusual book in that you took a bunch of podcasts and writings and tweets from Naval and put them together into a very cohesive framework, creating an almanac out of it. How did this project come about?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it feels unusual, because it's kind of what I was going for. It's a very interesting thing. This is almost, it feels like not quite a genre, but there's like a category of books that I'm sure kind of everyone listening to this is familiar with. It's like Poor Charlie's Almanac, the Letters of Warren Buffett, even 0 to 1. Peter Thiel's book was actually like compiled by Blake Masters. All of Peter Bevlin's stuff is kind of like a book that is built out of pre-existing materials. That's really like a curation, and it kind of makes a new format, and it transforms things, and sometimes it makes those insights easier to get to, or stickier, or more approachable for somebody who's not, going to Omaha every year, but really wants to kind of get some of the ideas of Buffett and Munger. So those have been some of my favorite books. And I realized, after 10 years of following Naval, that I really wanted this to exist. I've listened to all of his podcasts. I've been following him on Twitter. I read Venture Hacks, back in 2010 when that was current. And I'm really like seeing how much wisdom and knowledge there is in this kind of very ephemeral formats. Like, things are sliding into history. And I really wanted to pull some of this out that had been like impactful for me, and I see more and more people getting benefit from, and turn this into a book, something more timeless, something more approachable, something easy to kind of read and reference, reuse, easy for people to gift to each other, or just kind of get introduced to the world of Naval and his ideas.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a really interesting observation, that the person he's doing different interviews, and your thoughts sort of kind of evolve a little bit as you learn more, and you pick up more nuances, and to then be able to take all of the best stuff and sort of sweep it into a pile and see what's the best way he's ever said that idea, right? And then capture that.
Yeah, that's exactly. It was really interesting to see how long he's been evolving some of these ideas and finding new ways to articulate them and find new ways to kind of exemplify them. And so I wrote a blog post in 2008 that was like, basic formulas for life. That was kind of just a few words. It was, wealth equals accountability plus specific knowledge plus leverage. like that was it. That's the whole line.
Yeah.
And it takes, it's another 10 years before he's kind of unpacking these ideas and unfolding them and explaining them. Especially in the crypto world, he got a lot of repetitions of explaining some of those ideas and combining, the innovations of the blockchain with, the readings of Sapiens and this kind of like power of humanity to construct hypothetical things that we all collaboratively decide are true, and change our world.
Yeah. So question number 2, what was your favorite section to work on? And maybe we can talk a little bit about the different sections.
Yeah, the two main sections of the book are wealth and happiness. I wrote kind of a early manuscript that was much closer to Poor Charlie's Almanack. It was like 600 pages. It covered a ton of different topics. It was education. It was investing. It was a whole kind of primer on blockchain. And really, when I went through peer reviews and early readers, everybody was interested in the wealth and the happiness sections, and usually one or two more, but it wasn't universally appealing. So I trimmed, So I trimmed the book down to just be wealth and happiness. And there's a few kind of bonus sections at the end, like recommended reading. But I loved the working on the happiness section. It was probably the best for me because that's not a subject that I would study on my own. I bought the happiness hypothesis. I bought 10% Happier, but like those aren't the books I pick up, on a Sunday because I feel like I want to study it. I don't feel compelled to as much. And this project kind of forced me deeper down some of those rabbit holes. And I kind of realized how much work that I'm doing is like taking the long way, where if you just kind of if you study happiness, you study contentment, you look at some of the kind of more philosophical writing, you get a little bit closer to, are you sure you're not just taking like the long way, putting a lot of obstacles of, material success or accomplishment or perception or respect between you and a peaceful state of mind? Can you go straight to having a peaceful state of mind? Is that really what you're after? And realizing that that's the truth and you need to find a balance between those two things, is something that you see people kind of come to later in life more often, and being forced to kind of look at that earlier and find maybe a more healthy balance between ambition and contentment and desire and peace earlier in life, I found helpful.
That achievement versus fulfillment kind of dichotomy is one that I think a lot of people struggle with, especially if a lot of their self-worth comes from, feeling like they're getting things done and, making progress.
Winning their particular game. I think that's kind of, even at the end of the book, that's the tension that you're left with, is that you understand that you can't have both at the same time, and we are all kind of left to choose our own mix in whatever we want. And I think it's unusual to have these two kind of subjects paired in a book. Yeah, there's not a lot of people who talk about both of these things, let alone kind of as well. And there's not a lot of books that take them both on at once. But I think it's helpful to have them kind of contrasting each other a little bit, and to say, like, sometimes this part is going to speak to you more, sometimes this part is going to speak to you more, and to understand that these are kind of two ends of a pendulum that you want to kind of keep in balance. And maybe you should be reading whatever one you actually don't feel like you should be reading at the time.
Yeah, keep the brakes on either way a little bit.
Yeah.
Hedge your desires.
Yeah, exactly.
So question number 3, this probably was some of my favorite ideas that I've learned from Naval, is about, ego and identities and labels, and then how they translate into habits, and how a lot of us are just sort of unconscious to, how we sort of label ourselves and what the ramifications are of that.
Yeah, I think this is a really kind of foundational piece. And I think I think you could read a lot of this and not see yourself changing very much if you skip over this kind of set of ideas. I remember hearing Peter Kaufman say that, like, if I have described your habits, I have described you perfectly as a person. And I remember just being like completely shook by that idea. It's like, you are no more than your habits. Like, if I had to boil you down to your barest essence. And Naval says you are your habits plus the people you surround yourself with, plus your environment, which I think is a helpful kind of thing to add. It's a good addition. But the I'd like to like read a paragraph in the book actually, if I can do that, because I think it's a good. So this section is shed your identity to see reality. I think a lot of times that we don't see ourselves as being a lens on reality, but our egos are constructed in our formative years, our first 2 decades. They get constructed by our environment, our parents, and society. Then we spend the rest of our life trying to make our ego happy. We interpret anything new through our ego. How do I change the external world to make it more how I would like it to be? And there's this idea that we have like picked up a bundle of beliefs and thoughts and labels even about ourselves. You know, I'm Eric, I'm from America, I grew up in Detroit, like I like entrepreneurship and writing. You know, those are my labels. And we see all the time people kind of adopting labels and beliefs wholesale, like a whole package. You know, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Buddhist, I'm whatever. And there's this whole kind of set of givens that come with that label that become part of your identity and part of your ego. And you start to see the world as that it should conform to the set of beliefs that you have and that you are. One of Naval's kind of pithy tweets is, you know, you see yourself as fixed and the world as malleable, when really the world is fixed and you are malleable. And if you can reduce that identity and reduce shed the labels, get rid of your beliefs about what should be necessarily. Everybody around you has their own. That is what kind of creates the world as it is. And you are creating a tension between yourself and the world that may go unresolved your whole life and be a permanent source of unhappiness if you are too fixed and you see the world as malleable, when you can really control very little about your external world. You can only control your perception and how you label things as good or bad. And giving up on that is incredibly, incredibly difficult. Giving up your belief that you should judge the world and that the world should conform to, your set of beliefs. But zooming out and seeing that game and that package of things for what it is, and understanding that everyone has their own version of it and all of them are in tension with each other, is very difficult to do, especially over a long period of time, to keep that lens on.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard, but super foundational. It can change a lot of how you see the world.
Do you have any thoughts on that as in an investment context?
Yeah. I think you hear investors label themselves all the time. We hung out a few times at like Omaha and at Capital Camp, and people introduce themselves like, "Hi, I'm a value investor. I'm a long short, whatever, macro hedged guy." And you're like, okay, so you have all of these, blinders on about what is a good bet and what is in your realm and what is a thing that you can do. I'm a value investor. I don't buy things above a certain multiple. That inherently cuts you off from all of these different things. Or I'm a seed investor. I have to own, a controlling share of a thing. Everyone has these limits on what they're willing to do. And to some extent, those are very, very helpful because it keeps you in your circle of competence. But it also is a label. It's an identity, and it makes it really, really hard for you to work outside of that or to take advantage of opportunities that go against, how you've labeled, how you've identified. And so those are really, really challenging.
Yeah, it seems like it's difficult because you want to stay disciplined to a process, like that seems like a really good idea, but you can also very easily back yourself into a corner with labels, and then your identity and your ego start getting tied up in it as well.
Yeah, and like we said, everyone wants to win whatever game they're in, and so when you choose kind of what game to enter, you are choosing who you're competing against. You're choosing how likely you are to win it. You're choosing a lot of things. And we're all playing a game of some sort or another. That ego and that label is a shortcut to having an identity and being how you're perceived by others. We all need a shorthand on like, how do I know Jake? How do I know what Jake's into? Like, what do we talk about?
Because I put this jersey on. That's how you know I'm wearing this.
Yeah. We all have jerseys. We all have games that we pick. And I think it is interesting to see. There are times when that's very helpful, and it's good to see when those labels are helpful and what they're for. They serve a purpose in society and in relationships, but they also are very limiting, and it's harder to see the downside of some of these abstract things, some of these like kind of constructs that we see. And even in the world of social change, like there's a lot of things that need to change, but there's a lot more energy sometimes put into creating the perception of change than the foundation of change. There's an amazing quote from Aisha Akanbi, who I've been a recent follow on Twitter, and I absolutely love her. She's like a brilliant, I don't know how she considers herself, but she is like somewhere between poet and philosopher, and it's like her tweets are beautiful and brilliant. And one of them is, your need to be perceived as a good person is preventing you from being a better person.
Ouch.
You know, this like desire to create a label and create an identity is really like gets in the way of you fulfilling that identity and what you claim your purpose to be very often. What's more important, like what you put in your Twitter bio or what you do that you never tweet about at all. Whether that's
virtue signaling,
I'm an investor, I'm a seed investor, I'm an advisor, I'm whatever. It's there's a lot of energy spent signaling. And it'd be a very interesting data set to see. It's an impossible set to gather, but like what percentage of effort and brain cycles goes into how do I create a perception versus how do I become the thing that I want to be perceived as? And I would guess that we're social animals, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a reason these are deeply embedded instincts in us. And we are much better at creating a perception than we are at becoming. It's almost evolutionary.
I mean, every dollar of revenue of Facebook or Instagram is a measurement of that signaling.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could argue that like all brands are, value accrued to brands are that kind of signaling.
Yeah,
quite a lot.
So, question number 4. You spent, I mean, in some ways, a decade sort of working on this project, given how early you started thinking. But, what changes have you made in your own life since finishing this compilation?
Yeah, I think I set out to thinking that this would be like a 3 to 6 month project. I've never created like a full book before, of course. And it ended up being, we're coming up on 3 years here.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I think that was about what you said the Rebel Allocator took, right?
Yeah, about that. Yeah. That should have only been 3 months, but yeah.
Maybe you had a better estimate going in than I did, no. But it was a huge effort. And I have probably read and reread the material, 20 times in the course of this. It's a kind of a tough, like you're doing a giant like conceptual jigsaw puzzle, and you have to pick up a piece and kind of chisel away at it and really get it and then understand how it connects to everything else and where it should kind of be embedded in this and what other ideas connect to it across all these different mediums. So in doing so, I kind of built a little like, Naval that sits on my shoulder. And I hope that I have kind of given myself a little set of rules and picked up a lot of aphorisms and things that I've probably adopted like as my own almost.
Sure.
In ways that are like probably borderline plagiarism, but they're becoming like habits and statements and Ericisms, just like they were Navalisms before.
That's the sincerest form of flattery, right?
Yeah, and it's you see the trail of these ideas, back into who Naval has read and his influences and things like that. So, this is we're all standing on the shoulders of many layers of giants. I think, it has given me a lot of reassurance that I'm on a good path, I think, and it's reaffirmed some of the things, that I believe about work and, building wealth. It's taught me a lot about happiness and kind of the tension between those two things. I've heard some, this email list around the book has grown a lot and become really interesting. I've had some great interactions with people with much more radical stories than mine who, oh my God, I listened to the How to Build Wealth podcast 3 times in one day, and then I quit my job I quit my consultancy and started, building products. Or I heard this and I left med school and I moved across the country and I learned to code, or, just some really kind of life-changing things that I'm excited I'm going to collect all these, I think, and probably create a post of them because I think they're really, really interesting to hear. You don't often hear about like pieces of content that change people's lives so radically, so quickly. It's fulfilling, I think. I'm excited to see what comes of it.
That's great. So question number 5, as you're working through this jigsaw puzzle, what were some of the common ideas or themes across the different sort of contexts that emerged out, as the various advice that Naval has given?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's such a broad kind of set of things that it's a little tricky to like pull out a theme or two. I think the first one that comes to mind is like is very adamant that like life is a single player game at the end of the day. Like you control your perception of like the sight and sound inputs into your brain, and that you are responsible for yourself. Like you must have an internal locus of control. You control your own happiness. You control, who you spend your time with. You control all of these things that are going to determine you, like who you are, and how your life turns out. So really the beginning of all of the changes that you want to see is accepting that, he's got one that just is like a one tweet rant about, doctors won't make you healthy. Gurus won't make you smart. Like it is not the government's job to protect you. Like you have to take accountability for all of these things on your own. So that is one that is kind of like from wealth to happiness, like a foundational thing, self-sufficiency. Another would be thinking long-term. So, a huge percentage of the returns in life come from compounding, not just in investing, but also in relationships, also in learning and reading. That's a little bit in tension with the idea that you have to be present in every moment. So that's kind of an interesting, like, be fully present, but design your habits and,
but delay gratification.
You're thinking, in order to delay. A hedonistic spree is probably not going to be the best thing for your long-term happiness either. I would say like there's the end of the book is really kind of about his philosophy and some of the underlying kind of things that he thinks about the meaning of life. And that a little bit is, I don't think he gets enough credit for being funny and playful. His Twitter is a little bit serious, or a little bit kind of prescriptive almost. But when you get into like some of the older tweets,
you could almost say in some, if you wanted to take a less charitable view, like fortune cookie.
It's a little like self-serious, I guess. But I also think that when you have 1 million followers on Twitter, you can't rely on people to get the joke. So you probably take a little less risk than you would have otherwise. But he is very funny in like this kind of dry, like
subversive way.
And like punk kind of counterculture, like sci-fi thing from like Snow Crash that is just never goes away. And I think some of that comes from just having a wide perspective and zooming out and looking at the universe and at like the fact that we're all going to be here a very short time in the scale of the universe. And like, this is no time to waste time. It's no time to like take yourself too seriously, like have fun, make the joke, like work hard, but not insanely hard. Like your life is not about your work. And one of the most like, it's a one line, but it's so helpful. It's like any moment that you are on this earth and you are not happy, like you're not doing anybody any favors. Like it's not better for you. It's not better for the people around you. Who do you think you're serving with this unhappiness? Like, do you think that you have to be unhappy in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish, and that is going to then make you happy? Like you are withholding from yourself for no particular reason. Like this is a short amount of time. Like make a drink, watch some tennis, like go outside, like have some fun.
Yeah. There's a great quote, and I forget who it was now. I think it was Vonnegut who said that like, we're here to fart around and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Something like that. Yeah.
Like Feynman has some version of it too, it is hard to remember when you have your eyes on a goal. But yeah, that's where, Scott Adams' systems, not goals, things come in, appreciate the process, not the accomplishment.
Yeah. What, I really like that part when he was talking about, that all of us have this basically, if you keep digging and you keep kind of asking why, it gets back to just a fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
And that like then sort of echoes out in a whole bunch of different layers that we want to be remembered. We want to be like we want legacies. We have kids, all these reasons, just because we are fearing death.
Yeah. And the converse, that like studying and embracing death is the hack for a lot of things. Like there is no better way to be present than to remember that you're going to die someday.
Yeah, and like 3 generations, like no one will have known who you are, or I mean, it's like
yeah. One of my favorite, like, there's a few kind of lines in the book that I'm just like, when I read them the first time, I'm just like, put this down, like stare out the window for a minute. And one of them was that like, there will come a point in human history, if we make it this far, there will come a point in human history where like one word is all that remains of like our entire society and everything that we know, in the same way that we think of like the
Sumerians.
Incans or the Sumerians. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, Americans. Like I remember Americans.
I've heard of those before. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know any other fact about them, but like I remember that some people named Americans like existed. And going back to like your value of like your time on this earth is all what you perceive it to be in your own head. And so making that a positive interpretation and choosing, to see walk on the sunny side of the street, is the thing that you can control and the best thing for you.
Well, that's great. We always ask for a book recommendation. And so typically a little bit off the beaten path if we can, or underrated. What do you have for us today?
Yeah. You can't I can't answer with just one. It's two.
I know. It's a hard question in that way.
Yeah. Has anyone recommended Shantaram before?
No, but have
you heard of that? Is it off the beaten path enough?
Yeah, it's off the beaten path enough. I have read it though. So, but yeah, that's
okay. Oh, great. Well, I'll do another one then.
No. Pick that one. It's a tremendous, the writing of it is just so goddamn vivid. I mean,
yeah, it's Shantaram is like it's a novel, but it's very heavily based on this guy's life. And there's this Australian man with like a wife, kid, and he started to develop a bit of a drug problem and got addicted to heroin and started robbing banks. And on his 3rd bank robbery, he gets caught, goes to maximum security prison for 20 years. After 12 years, escapes over the front wall of the prison in broad daylight from a maximum security prison and runs away to India to like escape and live in like the villages and the slums of India. And for I think 20 years is like on the lam as one of the most wanted men in the world, and lives kind of among the villages in India and gets involved in organized crime and like sets up a free clinic in the slums and learns to speak local languages. It is the most incredible life story. He gets imprisoned and like jailed on 2 different continents.
Ugh,
Vivid,
that part was rough.
Horrific descriptions of of Indian prison conditions. But it's it's a long book. You feel like you have lived a whole nother life by the time you finish it. It's a beautiful novel. It is not ruining the ending to say that he eventually gets recaptured while like smuggling, and goes back, captured in Germany, and goes back to serve out the rest of his sentence. And he finishes this novel like while in prison. But he's an incredible writer. He's a philosopher. There's like deep philosophical discussions between the characters kind of woven into this book. It's an adventure in like a whole nother world.
Especially if you you don't, like most of us, haven't seen a slum in India. I mean, like that's not your world experience.
Yeah.
It gives you a much better sense of how, millions of people outside of our little bubble live and what their day-to-day life looks like.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so my friend Zaarly gave me this book, and she started this amazing tradition. So I've now like gifted this book to dozens of people and recommended it. And the tradition, she gave me this giant book, and I was like, what are you doing? I'm never going to have time to read this whole thing. And she's like, here, this is the deal. When I hand you this book, you have to read the first page immediately. And so when you kind of tell the story of this guy in this book, you read the first page. And so I can't do that for everybody right now, but Google first page of Shantaram on like image search. You will find it. It is the best first page of any book you will ever read. And it's like the teaser trailer for the whole thing. It absolutely makes you want to dive all the way in. It's an incredible story, and I highly, highly recommend it.
Well, it's a great recommendation. I read it last summer, and it's one of those ones that sticks with you for probably the rest of your life. And you're right; it's like living having another lifetime experience in a 600 pages or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, you feel fuller somehow after reading it. It's also amazing on Audible. They found really? The perfect narrator who's like an Australian accent but can like speak and pronounce Indian perfectly. So there can't have been a lot of people in the world who could have done that. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, Eric, thanks for coming on the show today and sharing, and really, honestly, thank you for putting in the effort that you did to compile all this, because it's a tremendous amount of wisdom that you've swept into a pile and organized and presented in a really, I mean, you could read this in one day and get a ton out of it, and then you could read 1 page a day for a year, and also would be like a great way to consume it. Like there's no bad way to eat it.
Yes. That was some advice from Nivi, actually, was to make the book fractal. So I think we use the tweets, which is kind of an interesting format. It's formatted like pull quotes. And so you can just kind of flip through the book and read it like a book of aphorisms. And if you see a tweet that's interesting to you, you can kind of dive in, or you can reread the table of content. It's kind of a summary of all of the big ideas that are in there and kind of refresh you once you've read the book. But I was really hoping to make something super dense. There's well over 1 million words of source material here that we've distilled down to less than 50,000, and really try to convey as much useful, helpful, kind of life-changing insight as you can into a few hours of reading.
Wow, that's great. I love that idea of making it fractal. That's really smart.
Yeah, you realize once you have seen or heard that, how rarely that happens, but how helpful it is, to be able to engage on different levels and kind of zoom in and out of the content and be able to refresh on it easily. And you see that in some of Nivi's writing and old blog posts and stuff. It's amazing, and that's one of the ideas I think that makes it so good, but is really difficult to kind of reverse engineer if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, thanks, Eric, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks a lot, Jake.
Before you go, do me the huge honor of picking up your copy of The Rebel Allocator, available on Amazon in both print and digital formats. It's a business person's guide to effective capital allocation, told in a coming-of-age story of a college grad who crosses paths with a wealthy Midwesterner. It's fiction for the nonfiction reader. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this interview. If you'd like to support this author and purchase their book, click here. If you'd like to become a subscriber to 5GQ, click here. And I included a couple other interviews that you might appreciate right here. Thanks. Happy reading.